Welcome to Discovering Joy with Roy. We're in a series I'm calling A Strength Not My Own. Today we'll talk about the future and what a difference a future makes. The scripture is Revelation 21, 1 through 4. We'll get to it shortly. I discovered what a difference the future makes when I turned 35. Heaven wasn't on my mind then, but the rapid passing of my years on earth was. I'm not much given to melancholy, but when my 35th birthday hit, it hit hard. I was halfway to my biblical 70 years, and only 30 years from retirement. That was a depressing thought. There was still so much I wanted to do with my life, so many projects, unfinished or unstarted. Life would be over long before I'd be ready to quit. Well, after a few days of moping, a life-changing truth struck me. I couldn't do anything about the number of my days, but there was something I could do about the number of my working days. Neither of my professions, a pastor, a professor, required retirement at 65. So I moved my projected retirement to 80, and that gave me 15 more years, and I immediately felt younger and stronger and more joyful. An often overlooked source of strength is the future. Nothing is more defeating than believing you have nothing more to look forward to. I've often thought of that lady in Boston who came from an old New England family. She was the embodiment of self-satisfaction. When she was once asked why she never traveled, she replied, "Oh, why should I? I'm already there." Well, I'm not. And I suspect you aren't either. Or you wouldn't be watching this video. You have places to go, people to see, things to do. You need time. You need the future. The Dallas Cowboys' longtime famous coach, Tom Landry, once explained what the future did for him. After 4 years as the new coach of the brand new Dallas Cowboys, his team still hadn't posted a winning season. In fact, the 1963 season's 4-10 record was even worse than the year before. As you can imagine, fans were demanding Landry's head. Tex Schramm, the general manager of the Cowboys, went to the owner, Clint Murchison, to talk about the criticism swirling around Landry. "We have to do something about all this public criticism of Landry," he told Murchison. "That's easy enough," the owner replied. "We'll just give Tom a new 10-year contract. That ought to shut people up." Well, that gave Landry an 11-year commitment, unprecedented for any professional in any major league sport. Landry had been handed a future, not one he deserved, since his record had been so miserable, but one that was more like grace, unmerited favor from a benevolent owner. He still had a losing 5th season and only a tying 6th season. But the rest is history. For 29 years he piloted the Cowboys. During many of those years, the best professional football team in existence. What if he hadn't been granted that future? What a difference a future makes. The Bible's message holds the future ever before us. Even when we die, we still have a tomorrow to look forward to. Knowing this, we find the strength to endure whatever the present moment throws at us. Our inspiration is Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. We consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men so that we will not grow weary and lose heart. He kept going because of the future God had prepared for him. The book of Revelation has always puzzled its readers. All those warnings and visions and so open to misinterpretation, so easily misunderstood. You and I may differ in our reading of specific passages, but one promise of the book is so clear, no one can miss it. God has prepared for his people a triumphant future. Revelation was sent to 7 churches in the province of Asia to bolster their faith during a period of fierce persecution. John's revelation is from God to show his servants what must soon take place. And it's good news. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They'll be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no mourning, or death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." He who is seated on the throne said, "I'm making everything new." This is a message of encouragement for besieged saints. For the moment, Satan may appear to be winning the struggle between good and evil, but don't be afraid. God is still on the throne, and the future Jesus went to prepare is ready and waiting. Take heart. Did you notice that word new? New heaven, new earth, new everything. The implication is clear. What's coming is so far superior to the present. We want to hang in there so that we can enjoy heaven forever. The Apostle Paul makes this very personal in 2 Corinthians. We're hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. He may be attacked, pushed, confused, persecuted, and damaged, but he cannot be destroyed because, as John writes elsewhere, the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. Even if we should die, we don't have to be afraid, because we know that the one who raised the Lord Jesus from the dead will also raise us with Jesus and present us with you in his presence. Elsewhere, Paul spells out what he's been through. Beatings with lashes and rods, stoning, shipwreck, recurring danger from bandits and fellow countrymen, and aliens, and hunger and weather, and on and on. Every time I read the list, I wonder whether I could have endured. But Paul also reveals his secret. Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. His strength is an inner power, not dependent on the frailty of the flesh. 2 Corinthians 5 spells out another source. Now we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile, we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, because when we're clothed, we'll not be found naked. For while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. There it is, the future. So real is Paul's future existence with the Lord. He reserves the word life in this passage for what's to come. Why aren't we worried? Because, like Paul, we live by faith and not by sight. The reality ahead of us is greater than the perplexities around us. So we're drawn forward. What strength of perseverance this faith gives us. One of the many lessons I've learned on this subject came back in the 1980s when a friend and I lost heavily in an investment. For me, the loss was extremely hard to accept since I had borrowed the investment money, against my wife's better judgment. My friend lost even more money than I did. One day when we were consoling each other, I said, well, at least we have recovery time. I was thinking of another friend who was a man up in his retirement years who had invested heavily in a speculative project. He withdrew his retirement funds that were more conservatively deposited in order to take a chance on a promise of a much greater return on a new investment. Well, he lost heavily. His loss hurt more than mine because of his age. Time was against him. There was no way for him to recover the lost money. My younger friend and I, we'd be all right. We had time to recover. We let the future rescue us. This lesson was brought home to me by one of our church's staff members. Our Mike Pryor and a ministerial colleague in another church were comparing the two churches' management styles. The colleague's church had a reputation for frequent staff changes. Apparently, the senior minister became impatient when his staff failed to meet his expectations. His method was to rid himself of the non-producer and replace him with another minister who he hoped would reach the senior man's goals. Well, our church, on the contrary, had very little turnover. Mike explained to his friend, that doesn't mean we've always produced well. In fact, he added, we all have had our bad years. We just hang on to each other until we get through them. We'd been able to tough out those hard years together because we felt secure in our jobs. Our church leaders wanted to hold the team together. From that sense of security, we gained strength. We looked to the future to get us through the present. Well, Paul applies this principle specifically to his physical stamina. His body, he says, is wasting away. His earthly tent is being destroyed by the erosion of years. Rather than despair, however, he exudes confidence because the future is his, whether in the present body or in his building from God an eternal house in heaven. He has recovery time. Bob Pierce founded World Vision many years ago when he was an exuberant, enthusiastic young man, and he received some invaluable advice from an older minister, what he called the secret behind winning organizations. It's staying power, he said. He'd made a careful study of leaders and organizations, biographies, autobiographies, history, contemporary leadership, and he found something that was common among all of them. He found staying power to be the one common element among the winners. Organizations whose leaders had higher education or greater reputations or greater natural gifts or a greater network of relationships would wither and die, while others with fewer advantages achieve success. He explained, the latter simply exercised staying power. When they were hanging on to the ledge, fingers bleeding as their nails were pulled off from their fingers, the people who won were those who just kept clinging somehow, some way. God intervened. He honored their staying power and gave them deliverance. Well, the minister's advice is instructive, isn't it? They held on until God intervened and gave them deliverance. They had a future to realize. The God of the future helped them into it. Our Christian faith is future-oriented. Unlike so many schools of psychology, it does not believe that we are solely what we are, solely because of past conditioning, good or bad genes, or good or bad childhood environment. A Christian is not driven by the past so much as drawn toward the future. The Christian faith is always hope-filled. When Jimmy Carter was president, he invited Israel's Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egypt's leader Anwar Sadat to Camp David, seeking a peace accord for the Middle East. Things were bad there. Well, the discussions went on and became deadlocked. Begin had rejected one of the major proposals crucial to any agreement. It appeared the conference was over. So as the three leaders were preparing to leave without an accord, Begin asked President Carter to autograph some photographs of the three leaders for his 8 grandchildren. Instead of merely signing his name, the president personally inscribed each of the 8 sets with the individual grandchild's name before adding his signature. And then he carried them to Mr. Begin's cabin. He wanted to tell the prime minister he was sorry they had failed. When Begin noticed the individualized inscriptions, he invited Mr. Carter into his cabin, and he looked at each grandchild's name, and he said it aloud. He repeated this for all 8 of them. And by the time he was finished reading just the names of his grandchildren, his lip was trembling, and he had tears in his eyes. And Carter said, we began to talk about the future of the world for our grandchildren if we didn't have peace. And we parted. Carter went back to his cabin. And now I'm quoting Carter. In about 15 minutes, he sent word over that he had accepted the issue that he had previously rejected. And it was from there that they went on very quickly and concluded the agreement. What made the difference? The pull of the future. They had to come to an agreement for peace between Israel and Egypt for the sake of his grandchildren. When he pictured his own grandchildren living with the tensions and the struggles that had marked his own life, he knew peace was not a luxury, it was a necessity. He had to do what he could do to give it a chance. Begin was applying the truth spoken by Elton Trueblood so many years ago. He said, a man has made at least a start on discovering the meaning of human life when he plants shade trees under which he knows full well he will never sit. Such is the importance of the future. And our future? There will be no more death or crying, no more mourning or crying or pain. Let me repeat that, it's so important. There will be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, nor pain. For as the Apostle Paul puts it, for which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. Just thinking about that future is a source of strength, isn't it? And a source of joy. For as Psalm 30 says, weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. Things may be dark right now, but tomorrow, no doubt about it. The future will be filled with rejoicing. I bid you joy.